May God help us as we focus our minds and our hearts into this passage this morning. At the moment, our beloved nation is deeply divided between Republican and Democrats, between traditionalist and progressive, between the conservative and the liberal, between non-denominational church and mainline. Because we don't get along, we are failing on race relation. Race-based discrimination has gone up exponentially in this country. Even Asian Americans have become a target because of COVID-19. Some ignorant people think all Asians are Chinese. Homelessness abounds because of inequity and inequality. I read an article written by Cheryl in the New York Times, and let me quote that for you. The coronavirus pandemic stripped an estimated 5.4 million American workers of their health insurance between February and May. A stretch in which more adults became uninsured because of job losses than have ever lost coverage in one single year. According to a new analysis, that's a new analysis. End of quote. Then I read another article where it says that the last June, 44.2 million Americans filed for unemployment insurance. Anywhere in the country, food pantry lines are getting longer. People with expensive cars are lining up because they are trying to save money to pay their mortgages and save money on food. Sisters and brothers, I want to apologize to you for boring you with these kinds of stats. But they are real. There are probably people that you and I know are going through this crisis. And we know that they need help from us. Browsing news and listening to news reporters today, people have become more impatient. Some people will call short-fused. They get angry quick. They lash out on people. And some people even spit on people. Some throw punches. Hotels, grocery stores, restaurant workers are being beaten by people, by their customers, because they asked them to wear masks. I pondered on all of these things, and reading the text, I would say we are going through some compassion fatigue. I have never seen this bad since coming to this country in 1982. That's a long time. Compassion fatigue, quoting from Wikipedia, is a condition characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion leading to a diminished ability to empathize or feel compassion for others, often described as the negative cost of caring. It is sometimes referred to as secondary traumatic stress. I read a research article from Australia, and they have done this research, and they came up with 3 different categories. One is a burned out. Burned out would have fatigue, anger, frustration, negative reactions toward others, cynicism, negativity, withdrawal. Compassion fatigue would have sadness and grief, avoidance or dread of working with some patients, reduced ability to feel empathy towards patients or families, somatic complaints, addiction, nightmares, frequent use of sick days, increased psychological arousal, changes in beliefs, expectations and assumptions, detachment, and decreased intimacy. The third one is vicarious traumatization, which is anxiety, sadness, and confusion. Compassion fatigue have taken toll on all of us. All of us. And maybe that is why, we have become intolerant, because we have no way of expressing some of our inner feelings and thoughts that's going on, because often we are alone. Because you can't talk to TV, That's a joke. You should be smiling. On the other side, I read, I see, and I have lots of friends who are nurses and doctors and lab workers, cafeteria workers, custodian in the hospital, receptionist, or farm workers. If they're not in the farm, we will have no food on the table. Food pantry volunteers, the police, firefighters, and etc., etc. I mean, you can just add on. These people are working overtime. Exhaustions is high among these essential workers. They're tired, but next day they have to get up, dress up, and then face the same dangerous realities, risking their own lives to serve others. And so there are burnout among those people as well. Some mornings I open LA Times, because we are LA Time readers, and you hear all this devastating news. Sometimes I feel like, or if I was a miracle worker, I would just fly around and do miracles for people who are dying, who are struggling. brings some good news to them. But we are not supermen or superwoman. Our capabilities are limited. Our resources are limited. Our patience are not unlimited. And so now I want to bring you to the gospel text for today. I think Matthew is reflecting on some compassion fatigue among the disciples. Reverend Roger Talbot puts it this way. Quote, "They were tired and they needed a day off. Crowds kept getting larger. More and more sick people were being brought to Jesus, and his disciples were getting burnt out dealing with all the human misery. So Jesus declared a holiday. Let's go camping, he said. At least that is what I think he said. Matthew makes it sound like he said, let's go off alone to a deserted place. My guess is he got no argument from his disciples. They took off their beepers. Do anybody use beepers anymore? No. Unplugged their phones, maybe that's the better one, and put up a sign saying closed for the day on the window. They got out their cooler, the tents, the sleeping bags, and of course their fishing poles. Put them into the boat and headed toward the undeveloped shore of Lake Galilee. We can imagine the conversation on the boat. Man, I'm going to spend the whole day just doing nothing. Wahoo, maybe they said. And somebody said, my biggest problem I want to deal with today is whether I'm going to take an hour nap or a two. And somebody will say, I'll be so glad to get away from people and their problems. I don't want to talk to anybody today except the fish. End of quote. But something Matthew says. Jesus was thinking about retreat, right? Jesus often just disappeared. And often Jesus was in communion with God. And so this is probably one of those moments. Jesus is thinking about retreat to rejuvenate himself as well as his disciples, to regain some perspective and to allow to relax our muscles and our mind to be refreshed, to focus better. But the text says, verse 13, the crowds heard where they were headed and followed them on foot from many towns. Not just one village, one community. But at this point, Jesus was like a folk hero, heard People heard about him, and so they followed him. And so when Jesus and his disciples arrived at this undeveloped side of the Sea of Galilee, there was a massive crowd waiting for them. In verse 14, you will not believe what Matthew said. Jesus had compassion on the crowd, meaning Jesus felt their pains. Your pain is my pain. Jesus understood their desperation. Jesus was moved. Yeah. Jesus was responding to the needs of the people. And he was healing them. Now, you might say that, Pastor David, you are mixing up the stories. And in a way it is. Because this particular story about feeding of the multitude is being told many different ways. For Matthew and Mark, they told in two different versions. In Matthew 14 and Matthew 15, in Mark 6 and Mark 8. And then we have Luke, and then we have John. And so this it has a very broad range as you read this particular story. But I think the important part to know is that Jesus or the gospel writers are saying this is very important. There is a message in this particular story to be told, to be understood. Matthew says Jesus cured people. He did not harangue them and make them feel guilty and terrible about themselves. He gave the lame what they needed to stand on their own 2 feet. He gave the blind what they needed to see clearly again. He gave the deaf what they needed to be at peace with themselves. He gave the dying what they needed in order to live. Jesus had compassion. And when all of these things are happening simultaneously, one of the disciples said, Jesus, send these people away. We have nothing to feed them. There is no grocery stores, food suppliers around here that can provide 5,000 plus. Some commentators says about 10,000 people. Those days, no grocery stores will have supplies readily available to feed or accommodate 10,000 people. I'm sure disciples felt fatigued. It was better for them that the crowd left. They were probably saying to Jesus, we want to rest. We have no ounce of any energy to give them anymore. We are tired of managing crowd. Think about that. Disciples thought they were done for the night. But Jesus said one of the strangest things in this text. He said, that isn't necessary. Don't send them. You feed them. Wow. You feed them. Is it possible? Disciples reacted by saying, no way we can do that. We have nothing, no resources to really feed all of these people. Impossible. I think we probably have said the same thing umpteen different times. God, I cannot do it. It is just not impossible. I don't have enough money in the account to even give $1 to somebody. Tragedies, famine, hunger, homelessness, social justice issues, racism issues, all of these things requires our attention, requires our ability to respond. Because we are all people of God. If people of God cannot in unity respond to the needs of the people, there will be more chaos. Yeah. Can we eliminate hunger? Yeah. Good question. Nelson Mandela expressed a very interesting thought. He said, like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the action of human beings, so as all others inequity and inequality that exist. Some of you may have read Parker Palmer, a Quaker educator, wonderful thinker. He wrote something that he experienced in the plane. And this will be my last illustration for the text. I was en route to a conference when the plane made an unexpected long layover at an airport. A truck that was supposed to deliver refreshments for the next leg of the journey broke down. Finally, the pilot decided that it was more important to get his passengers on their way than to wait for the snacks to arrive. So he took off. As soon as they were in the air, the passengers started to grumble. Somebody said, "A ticket is a contract." And another responded by saying, "Snacks are part of the contract." And another one muttered, "I ought to sue." A man stood up and said, I'm a lawyer. How many are willing to join in a class action suit? A minor mutiny was in the works. Then something interesting happened. A flight attendant came on the public address system. She began with this familiar information on such flights. Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned off the seatbelt lights. We have now attained a cruising altitude of 30,000 feet. Then she said something quite extraordinary. Having served many of you on the first leg of the flight, I know some of you still have your bags of peanuts, which you stuffed in your pocket. How many do we have? 5? Please open them and share them with the people around you. I'm sure some of you have mints. Would you pass these around also? Those of you with newspapers, you can also read, you can only read one section at a time. Spread the other section around for others to read. Some of you are parents and grandparents, and show them to others. Take those pictures out. Share with your neighbors. With that brief announcement, she changed the emotional climate of that flight. Later, when the flight attendants came to Parker, what's your name? What's the name of your supervisor? I want to write a letter of commendation. That was the best example of group leadership I've ever seen. To which she replied, quote, loaves and fishes still works. Maybe Jesus told the disciples, miracles are right in front of you. It's about to happen. And at that point, one of the disciples says, there is a lad here with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus was not fazed. He just said, bring them on. Bring them over. He blessed. He looked towards the heaven. He blessed it. He broke it and told the disciples, go and share. I am just reading between the lines as Jesus is lifting and praying all of this. Maybe all those 5,000 people were putting their hands in their pouch and their shoulder bags and maybe pulling out the sandwiches that they had prepared. And when Jesus blessed them, they also blessed and decided to share among them. Miracle took place. God invites us to be a miracle in somebody's life. You would say, you've been in that situation many times, and God always came through. God always blessed me to bless others. I was so worn out, tired. I had given up. And yet, something happened. God spoke to me. And I did it. And that was the most powerful thing I have ever experienced about God's power and miracle in my life. You will say that. So that's what it is. So don't get tired of doing things. Yes, we will get tired. We will be exhausted. But never give up from doing what is right, what is proper. Amen?